Do you want to know what's happening in our property markets right now? How do you keep track of the markets that change on a daily basis? Well, in the good old days, remember them? There was a real-time index that we used to call the auction clearance results, and they were particularly relevant in Melbourne and Sydney. But that's an irrelevant statistic today, isn't it? The second most commonly quoted statistic was median prices. But how relevant are they today when we've got so fewer properties transacting? But recently, Dr. Andrew Wilson, Australia's leading housing economist and chief economist of myhousingmarket.com.au, devised a new index that should give us a better indication of what's really happening in the market. So I look forward to discussing it. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes.
Well, in the old days, there was the number of properties on the market listing, but you've created a new one. It's actually the new listings, how many new properties are coming on the market for sale, as opposed to those old quoted total number of properties. Why did you go to the trouble of developing this? How is it different?
Well, things have changed, Michael, of course, as we all know, in terms of the housing market. We've more or less come to a complete halt. I don't mean that there are no transactions, but certainly there's been a significant impact on sentiment with the government policies on coronavirus, and this will have an impact on the housing market. We will have fewer transactions, and that means fewer buyers and sellers. And we've also had actions by the government that have curtailed the auction market. Of course, open air auctions are no longer allowed, and we've also seen open for inspection processes also. What our traditional measurement processes on that week-to-week auction clearance rate data that we do use for more timely insights into what's happening in the housing market, it means that data is, at least at the moment, no longer relevant. So I looked at perhaps some more real-time measures for understanding, particularly in times of uncertainty that we have now, what's happening in the housing markets. I use listings data for median prices, use asking prices as quite a reliable and robust methodology for understanding price movements and price levels. But the actual number of listings is also important because it tells us seller sentiment. I think it's more important to focus on new listings, that is properties that have been newly advertised for sale, because that gives us a real-time indication of how sellers are feeling in the marketplace.
Andrew, what did you use as a starting point? Where do you take your baseline?
Well, look, what I do, Michael, is track the number of newly advertised homes for sale. That obviously gives us that insight into how sellers are feeling about the market. So I track that on a daily basis and I measure it over a week's period. So I take every day the number of new listings over the past week, and then for the next day, I then move it forward one day. So it gives us a day-to-day on weekly basis of how newly advertised listings are moving. Now, I set up an index which I based on March the 1st. So the index was based at 100 on March the 1st, and that's the date when I guess we were still in a normal market environment. From that period forward, I then track from that point of 100 being the base, the movement in the number of newly listed properties on a day-to-day basis. And the latest results clearly show us that there's a falling trend. We shouldn't be surprised at that, particularly given the sharp decline we've seen over the past week, of course, reflects what's normally a quiet period in the market, the Easter slowdown. So yes, we have seen a decline down to around 50 points on that index measure from that 100 starting point. But a lot of that, of course, is the normal Easter seasonal effect where we do get fewer new sellers coming into the market. But we can compare it to the same period last year. And we look at the current index settings, we can see that notwithstanding that seasonal effect, the numbers are still 20% lower than where they were a year ago. That gives us our first sign of what sellers are thinking of the market in terms of the coronavirus effect. And currently, we can say that new seller numbers are down by around about 20%.
Of course, there's always going to be people who have to sell because of personal circumstances, but clearly the discretionary sellers are going on strike at the moment. Now, you mentioned a moment ago, another useful real-time index is asking prices.
Yes.
How accurate have they been in the past compared to the final sale prices? What happens 60 days, 90 days later after these asking prices come on the market?
Well, Michael, my asking price index, which captures asking prices over a quarterly period, track almost identically to the ABS official property index series. So really that does equate to, or asking price data equates to selling price data with a high degree of accuracy. And of course, the benefit of asking price data is we can get it in real time, whereas sale prices do rely on a backward-looking model with sales prices, of course, when they're officially recorded, can be 3 months or more from the actual time that that sale has occurred. And we have seen not a lot of movement since that March the 1st starting point, if we use that as a benchmark, in our capital city markets, with the exception of Sydney. Sydney median asking prices on that week-to-week basis are actually down by nearly 2% since that March the 1st date. So it'll be interesting, Michael, to watch both those series as they unfold. So far, I guess we shouldn't be surprised at the decline in newly listed properties, but it's certainly not what we would call a significant crash at this point.
I commend you for coming up with these indexes, because there's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen to our property markets from some wild predictions of up to 30% falls, not based on data. And it's just too hard at the moment to speculate when you've got a moving target.
Yes, absolutely, Michael. And the problem that we have at the moment is we really don't have a clear insight to how the market is tracking in these particularly uncertain times.
Look forward to getting across the bridge, as the government keeps telling us. In the meantime, you're going to keep us up to date with what's happening in the market with these new indexes. Look forward to discussing them again with you next week. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Michael.